We recently wrapped up Volume 1 of Batman the Animated Series, and with that I figured I'd rank every episode within the volume. There are a total of 28 episodes, 3 of those being two-parters, so there are only 25 entries on the list. So let's go ahead and jump into the ranking.
That's for the courts. But this time, I am sorely tempted to do the job myself.
The Underdwellers. There is not much to like about this episode. About the only things that are enjoyable, the Sewer Boy. Other than that, it's not enjoyable whatsoever, I don't think. Not only is it the worst episode within the volume, I think it may be the worst episode in the entire series.
Perhaps the stars can persuade you. I see a bad moon rising. Lisa! Fine, or she pays!
Prophecy of Doom isn't necessarily a bad episode, it's just a boring one. Barely anything happens in this episode, and the entire 20 minutes just feels like filler. There's nothing memorable from the episode, and it just feels like an episode that didn't need to be made, but was just made because they had to meet the episode order.
Oh, bourgeois. Tearing this place apart could only improve it. Let the egg hunt begin!
This episode may actually be a worse episode than Prophecy of Doom, but I've got bad lists, but because of that, I think it's more fun to watch and just kind of make fun of the stupid. Didn't set up him as a villain or a character very well at all. Batman's barely in the episode, a lot of negative things, but I'd rather rewatch this one over the past two.
Enjoy extinction, Batman!
I'm not going alone.
Another disappointing intro to a villain, Pretty Poison. It's not as nearly as bad as I've Got Batman in My Basement, but it's just kind of your standard BTAS episodes are better than this episode. Ivy just wasn't a very interesting character, and her connection with Harvey didn't feel important or anything. And I don't really think it sets up Harvey becoming Two-Face or anything like that very well. I don't think it sets up Harvey as a character too well. And this is really the only episode we have Harvey in before Two-Face, so yeah, just because of all that is why this episode ranks so low.
What are you babbling about? What bat?
Right here.
There it is! Batman!
The Forgotten is an interesting episode of Batman the Animated Series because for a large majority of the episode, Batman isn't Batman, he's undercover as a homeless guy, and me because I'm not a big fan of Amnesia storylines. I think they're just too convenient and overdone and everything you watch. So that's why this episode isn't that amazing to me, but it's still interesting, and I think the inclusion of like the Joker and the dream sequence when he pulls Batman through the mirror is really interesting. Some interesting things, the villain is kind of a joke, which he's meant to be, so this episode's very self-aware, and I do enjoy it, but there's just others I enjoy much more.
I heard gunfire.
Occupational hazard. No. Let's keep the mystery. Police? Don't be silly. You can't deny there's something between us.
You're right. And I'm afraid it's the law.
By far the worst two-parter to come out of this volume was The Cat in the Claw, the introduction to Catwoman. And it's mostly because two parts were not needed. I think if this was a single standalone episode, it would have been much better, more compact, and everything would have flowed better, the pacing would have been better. I'm not a massive fan of Catwoman, and Red Claw was one of the villains that this show created that just didn't work, which is obviously why she didn't end up making her way into the comics like many of the characters that this show created did. I do enjoy much of Batman's and Catwoman's dynamic in the episode though, and I like the focus on Batman's detective work in the two-parter, and that's a focus of a lot of episodes, but I think there's really an emphasis on it in this two-parter. And Batman taking down terrorists is just always fun to watch.
No trace of this Clock King, though.
How could anyone survive a wreck like this?
If I could, he could.
Then, you think we'll hear from him again?
I wouldn't be surprised, Commissioner. In fact, I'd say it's only a matter of time.
The Clock King is a very interesting character that I've just never really gotten behind. He's never really intrigued me too much, and I've never gotten into the character. I can see why a lot of people would like him, so I can see why some people would enjoy this episode much more than I do. I think it is interesting how the Clock King goes about taking on Batman because of his obsession with time. Like, I think it's really cool when he knows how long it takes Batman to throw a punch. So I think the threat he was, but he did get screwed out of millions of dollars, so I understand it at the same time.
Kill Captain Clown. You kill Captain Clown! Just for that, Batman.
There were 4 Joker episodes in this volume, all of which were enjoyable, but I think the least of the 4 was The Last Laugh. It's just kind of your standard Joker episode, you know, he's gassing people with the laughing gas and all that, and it's pretty fun throughout. Captain Clown is super memorable. It's just that there are several more Joker episodes that I would prefer rewatching and think are better than this one. And also he gets defeated the exact same way he does in Christmas with the Joker, which kinda takes away from both in Christmas with the Joker.
This used to be a beautiful street. Good people lived here once.
Good people still live in Crime Alley.
Appointment in Crime Alley is an episode about a subject that I think is very important. And Daggett is just planning to blow up like all these buildings in Crime Alley, I think some of which are abandoned, but it's going to kill everyone that lives there. But of course the actual appointment in Crime Alley is Batman's appointment with his parents on the day that they died, their anniversary, so he can lay the roses there and pay his respects. Which I think really saves this episode and pushes it to an above average episode. Also the inclusion of Leslie Tompkins, this was the introduction of her character, and her dynamic with Bruce is similar but different than Alfred's.
How can I get to be a great magician like you?
Well, there are 3 steps. Step 1, run away. Step 2, find a magician with a great act. And step 3, steal it.
Going back to the Joker with Be a Clown, just like The Last Laugh, this is a fairly standard Joker episode, but I think the carnival hideout that he has just elevates this episode a little more. I don't know why, I just enjoy that set piece so much. I think it's very Jokerish, and this is the first Joker episode where he actually has a hideout. Also, the whole message of the episode is kinda telling parents to listen to their kids instead of just telling them what they should do and all that. Because, you know, they might run away to a carnival with the Joker if you don't.
Get ready for your biggest disappearing act, Ventress. The one where no one sees you for 10 to 20.
Me and Mommy are moving, and even if Daddy gets out of jail this time, he'll never...
Oh, him again.
This may be the weirdest episode in the entire volume. See No Evil. It's about a father with an invisible cloak wanting a imaginary friend sneaking into her bedroom at night, which is really weird, and then when he kidnaps her later, he's like, "You're coming with me whether you like it or not," which is really creepy. But with the creep factor out of the way, I think Batman versus the Invisible Guy is really interesting in how when he throws paint on him, he can see him because, you know, it sticks to the costume and the paint's not going to turn invisible. And later on, he drenches him in water and that just reveals him. So, kind of showing Batman.
Dr. Long, I'll take that. Over my dead body, if you insist.
Nothing to fear. While I do think this is a good episode, I think it could have been better because it's about a very important element of Batman's character, which is him struggling with the loss of his parents, in this mostly his father. And this being a Scarecrow episode really works because it's about Batman dealing with how his father would feel about him as a man. Like, would he be disappointed in what Bruce has become? Would he be disappointed that Bruce is in search for vengeance, that he became Batman? But it all comes full circle in the night, I am Batman. And I just insulted that line by quoting it. I should just play it right now.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
I'm not a huge fan of the initial Scarecrow design, but I think it gets better as the show goes on, and I don't think the design affects the quality of the episode.
The guy tried to bolt, and the Batman just pointed at him. Wham! He drops. It was unbelievable. Batman's on the guy in a flash. Then the Batman says something to him.
The first real unique episode we got within the show was POV, about 3 cops, just this young cop called the Rookie. And I absolutely love the Rookie story, first of all, because he sees Batman as a supernatural being, much like a lot of people have been known to see him in the past and in the comics and all that. I also really like that you get to hear each of the cops' stories, but it's showing what actually happened, not what they are saying. So Bullock's making himself, he's making a fool of himself, tripping over paint cans and stuff like that. This is a really weird thing to say about a Batman show, but I think this episode is really brought down once Batman actually gets majorly involved within the show. I think the first half of the episode is much better than the second half is.
Yeah, and it would have gone down smooth if you hadn't butted in. But hey, I'm adaptable. When you grow up looking like I do, you gotta learn to go with the flow. I'll just take care of you first, then Bullock.
Vendetta is a really enjoyable episode for me because I like it when villains impersonate cops or someone like that to get them thrown in prison and to frame them. I like well done, and the animation looks pretty good throughout. And I really love Batman and Bullock's dynamic in the episode, especially the end when Bullock gives a speech about being back or fighting for the law, whatever he says, and Batman just has this huge grin on his face.
2 for dinner, sir? I got a list of all the items stolen from the chemical labs. Who would have thought they'd be used to create a monster?
Batman out as a vigilante, and who better to do that than the one villain to kick off the show, but I think it sets the tone of the show and the feel.
It's no joke, I assure you. It's the fear of victory and the agony of the Scarecrow.
I feel that Fear of Victory portrayed Scarecrow's potential in the show and the danger of his fear toxins better than Nothing to Fear did, because Nothing to Fear was really about Batman's inner struggles than it was with the fear toxin affecting him, although it's really affecting people because Scarecrow is affecting these athletes to get money on games he's betting on because he's betting on the team that's most likely definitely going to lose. Then he rigs it with fear toxin. I really love this episode because it's a Robin episode, one of the only two, a little more for me, especially since you get a line of dialogue from the Joker, and then when they realize Scarecrow is indeed not in Arkham Asylum, he has escaped, you hear the Joker laugh. Episode, but a dark episode. I feel like this episode gets overlooked by how dark it is because it's a Christmas episode and the atmosphere is joyful, but the Joker is so dark in this episode. This is probably the darkest the Joker is up until just because of the line of Batman saying, "I could never get past the title," which is,
"You'll harm these poor, mind-warped innocents to get me? Let's find out."
Mad as a Hatter is an introduction to the Mad Hatter that's better than any Mad Hatter introduction I have ever seen, and better Alice storyline where he's obsessed over Alice and he just can't get her, and eventually he turns to the mind technology to mind control her and get her that way. I don't really know what you're expecting if you're not expecting that, but yeah, it's a really weird episode.
Yes, do come along, Master Bruce. It's time to go home.
Now getting into the episodes I absolutely adore. Dreams in Darkness. I think this works on all fronts. It works as a scare episode, incorporates Robin, Alfred, the death of Bruce's parents, fear toxin. It's a really dark and emotional episode because of scenes like where in the scene where he thinks he's about to hit Robin when Robin's standing in the middle of the road and he swerves off the cliff. I just absolutely love the episode, and I think it's about as good as you.
We're here, Michael. I came to help you, Arnie.
I don't need your help.
Is that a fact? An empire crumbling? A marriage shattered?
Possibly the most underrated episode of the entire show. It's an episode that completely deals with drug addiction. This is a kid's cartoon and it's dealing with serious matters like drug addiction. This is an episode that you watch and you know, but it goes much deeper with that because of the drug and family storylines. There is a minute touches on very important subject matter, so I just love this episode so much from beginning to
greatest scene of his career.
See you around, Matt.
A death scene so real, it fooled us all.
Clayface is a really compelling character. Perlman's voice is a terrific fit for Clayface. He drops him into a pool, and that land probably would have killed him if it was realistic, but it's a cartoon.
Give me that file!
relationship between Grace and Harvey because I just don't really buy into it. We hadn't seen Grace between Harvey and Bruce. The relationship between both of Harvey's personalities, Harvey and Big Bad Harv, which later becomes Two-Face after he literally gets half his face scarred. Also, the transformation of Two-Face is amazing. The lightning shot. Rivalry between Thorne and Harvey is, of course, an important part of Two-Face's character. It's important, and him becoming out is also extremely good. This episode is just beautiful on almost all fronts. Beware the Grey Ghost is a fantastic episode that's only elevated by Adam West. He doesn't at first, but eventually he comes around. And the end scene is absolutely beautiful where...
You're crazy!
I had a good teacher.
Batman! How long have you...
that the Joker wants him to do is open a door. 2 years of fear for opening a door, and then of course the Joker is going to kill him anyway. Guy's like, you said you were going to send me back to my family, and then classic Joker once again, I never said a lie. It's just probably the closest thing to classic Joker you get in the show. Because although this Joker is very much classic Joker in a sense, just everything he does in this episode hides behind Batman. Batman doesn't do anything. He's just hoping that it's a fake bomb, I guess. If not, so important because it introduced Harley Quinn. Very memorable for many reasons. Also, the museum set piece. That's such a great set piece for a Joker episode. There's so much he can do. Very Arkham-esque. I feel like Arkham could have lifted things from this specific episode.
Summer's day with a hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh yes, I'd kill for that.
To one of the greatest Batman villains of all time. He's just extremely simple emotions, but you know he's really not because he has this love for Nora. Everything he does is for her. And all he wants to do in this episode is get back at the man. Being cryogenically frozen isn't introduced. That's not until the next Mr. Freeze episode, which is something I often forget before watching this episode. But much like Two-Face, some of the greatest quotes ever. They are so emotional, and every line that he delivers, you feel that's important. When Mr. Freeze speaks, it leaves an impression. And also, Ferris Boyle, the guy that Mr. Freeze is after, he's voiced by Mark Hamill. This was the first episode that Mark Hamill voiced in. This is possibly what got him the job for the Joker. This is what got him the Joker. And the ending shot of Freeze and the Arkham cell with the snow globe of his wife made a series. Let me know your ranking down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you not? Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will see you guys sometime.